featuring Janet Benton, Autumn Kanopka, and Randall Brown. Maria Ceferatti is a music teacher, music director of Acting Without Boundaries, and an MFA candidate at Rosemont College. Her work has been published in Apiary Magazine, Driftwood Press, Philadelphia Stories, and is forthcoming in Minerva Rising. Please welcome Maria.
Olga's vision. My 8-year-old son recited grace as we stared at the steam rising from the dish of lasagna on the kitchen table. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts which we are about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen. Oscar, my husband Samuel said, I think that was the fastest version of grace I've ever heard. Well, I'm hungry. Let's get the show on the road. I looked at Samuel and shook my head. We never knew what was going to come out of that kid's mouth at any given moment. I put the lasagna in a plate in front of Oscar. Wow, it's hot, he said, touching the lasagna with his fingertips. Yeah, you should see the steam coming from it, Samuel said. You better blow on it. I sprinkled grated cheese on the lasagna, then placed a scoop of green beans next to it. Your lasagna's on the right, and the green beans are on the left, I told him. Water's next to your plate on the right, and fork and napkin are on the left. Oscar gently moved his hand until it made contact with the glass, and then with his left hand, he tapped lightly on the table until he located his napkin and fork. Once he found the fork, he began to dig in. When we were finished, there were 2 pieces of lasagna left over, and I felt like they were staring at me. And I knew why. I'm going to wrap this up and bring it to Olga, I said. Oh, geez, Oscar said, getting up from the table and pushing in his chair. How long are you going to be? Not long. You have to read to me and put me to bed, and you're going to be over there, and she's going to be talking and talking and talking, he said. Samuel began clearing the table. I got an idea, he said. Bring her the lasagna, and then ask her to put you in her will. She's got to be loaded. Come on, you guys. That poor woman's 94 years old. Both of her sons hardly communicate with her, and her extended families know better. I feel badly for her. She should feel badly for you because you talk so much, Oscar said. Don't worry, I said. I'll just be a few minutes. Mom, wait a second. Look what I can do. Oscar located his empty plate on the table and carefully held it as he walked to the counter. My husband and I had been practicing this process with him, so we watched silently, trying not to jump in to help. Oscar made it to the counter with the plate, and he slid it over too far towards the sink. Before we could stop it, the plate teetered on the edge and then fell into the sink with a loud crash. Oscar jumped. Oh no, he said. It's okay, sweetie, I said. Even sighted people drop things, don't worry. I drop things all the time, my husband said. You do? Oscar was blinking back tears. Yeah, Daddy's a huge klutz, I said. Hey, Samuel looked at me. Aren't you supposed to be delivering some lasagna right about now? Don't be long, Oscar said as I dashed out the door. I stepped out into the chilly evening. Poor Oscar, I thought, as I walked toward Olga's house. Single 2-bedroom ranch houses lined the street. Built in the 40s, they served as either starter homes or finisher homes. Mine was the former, Olga's was the latter. As I passed under a streetlight, I cringed when I saw a familiar sign. A yellow diamond with black letters reading Blind Child Area. Screw you, I wanted to say to that sign. It stood in the spotlight like a diva in an opera. I squeezed the foil pan of lasagna tightly and walked on. I arrived at Olga's house and knocked at the door. She came and held it open for me. I had been there a few weeks ago with some lentil soup, but her 4'10" frame seemed even smaller somehow. Look at my hands, she started immediately, and held her hands up for me to see. Hi, Olga. I stood in her entryway. I looked down at her hands. They were twisted and thick, like gnarled tree trunks. This hand is pointing east, and this hand is pointing west, she said. I can't hold anything anymore. I try to eat, and I drop my fork, my spoon, everything. She shook her head. Did I tell you how long it's been since my son in California called me? 2 years. How long? I said. 2 years, she went on. I always have to be the one to call him. Can you believe it? Could I believe it? Actually, stop, behave yourself. That's awful, I said. Look at this, she pointed to her left eye, noticeably smaller than the right. This one, they screwed up with that experimental laser. She waved her hand in front of her eye. Nothing. Macular degeneration. Macular. It was getting chilly. Take a deep breath. Be patient. Then she pointed to her right eye with her crooked index finger. It shone, clouded and coated like an opal. This one has the cataract. I can barely see your face. Your dark hair, I can see, and your jacket, it's blue, no, it's black. She waved her stiff hand and rounded, shook her head. I brought you some lasagna, Olga. Oh, good, she smiled and patted me on the shoulder and let me into the house. She walked with a cane, and I followed her as she slowly limped into the living room. Her house was spotless, like a pictorial from Harper's Bazaar on how to properly keep one's home in 1957. A tall but narrow china closet stood dignified against one wall, and porcelain figures created scenes on every shelf. Elegant women in broad hats and walking canes, boys and girls frolicking and frozen on an unseen countryside, birds tilting up their chins, silently chirping. She had told me that most of them were gifts from her father as she was growing up. He owned a barber shop in the Warwick Hotel, and every now and then he'd go to a nice jewelry shop and buy something special for her. Some of the figurines are probably worth a small fortune. I fell again, Olga said proudly. You did? What happened? She stopped hobbling and pointed toward her living room curtains. I put up my winter curtains. Winter curtains? Who changes their curtains for the seasons? When I put up blinds in my front window 2 years ago, I put them up and I never looked back. Why didn't you call me, Olga? I said. Samuel and I could have helped you with that. She shooed at me with her east-facing hand. Oh, I just got up on the stepladder and did it myself. I've done it myself forever. It's this foot, it's giving me trouble again. She pointed to her foot wrapped with a bandage. You think my son would call me and see how I'm doing? Her eyes flashed with sudden ferocity. You think my granddaughter would stop to see if I'm okay? An hour away is not that far. I used to have the whole family here, around that table for Thanksgiving. She pointed toward the dining room. Her dining room could have been roped off like an exhibit in an art museum. A beautiful cut glass bowl was the centerpiece of a mahogany table, dressed with a delicate runner that she crocheted when her fingers were more nimble. My son, the one who lives an hour away, is on a waiting list now for his kidney, she said, bringing me back to the moment. Yes, you mentioned that the last time I was here. I'm sorry to hear that. I started to shuffle a bit toward the kitchen just to keep things moving. You know how many pills he has to take? Olga continued. More than you, from what I can recall. She held out her palm before I could respond. He takes 30 pills during the day. And me? She pointed to the center of her palm. I take 1 baby aspirin. That's it. For all the pain I'm in. For my hands and my foot, that's all I can take on account of my heart. I'm not allowed to take any painkillers. The painkiller sounded pretty good right about now. I'd always wanted these visits to be more somehow. I envisioned coming here once a week and bonding with Olga. I would listen to her stories while she taught me how to sew, or she would show me how to cook her prized recipes while I kept her company. Again, listening to her stories. I wanted Tuesdays with Maury, but I wasn't getting it. Instead of a patient, sage mentor, my Maury was a bitter, voluble, self-centered old woman. And on top of it all, she never asked me about my life, about my son. She went on, I died twice, you know. I remember you told me, once at your house and once in the elevator of Lankenau Hospital. My heart stopped. They brought me back, though. Well, Olga, I'm glad you're here now. I cleared my throat. At this rate, she'd probably outlive all of us. We made it to the threshold of the kitchen. I spotted the refrigerator beckoning me. Olga stopped. You know, my mother ignored my crippled sister. I was the one, she pointed to her chest, who taught her how to speak. This was one of the stories that had always fascinated me. I couldn't imagine practically ignoring my own child because of a disability. She couldn't walk or talk good, but she had her mind. Olga tapped on the side of her head. My mother had a business of making dresses, and she was very talented, but she shouldn't have had children. She was cold, and she didn't nurture us. This is what I remember from my mother. Suddenly, she thrust her hand in front of my face. Not now, Olga, she'd say to me. Not now, I'm busy. She was always making dresses, working. That's what I remember from my mother. Not now. You know who raised me? Not my mother. Who? I leaned in toward the kitchen, hoping that's where we would begin to saunter again. A colored woman. She lived with us. Her eyes grew fierce again. She's the one who kissed my scrapes. She fixed my dinner, not my mother. She looked down, shaking her head. It struck me that at 94 years old, she still carried such resentment toward her mother. I'll just put this in the fridge for you, Olga. I can't stay long. I have to put Oscar to bed soon. She was blocking my path. I didn't want to marry my husband, you know. I knew. Really? I sidestepped her a bit, looking at her while creeping toward the fridge. When I watched him with my sister, he was so good to her. He would carry her up the stairs. He took her out to eat. Nobody saw cripples at restaurants back then. That's true. That's why I married him. She put her hand over her heart. He was a good man, she sighed. But I never had an orgasm with him. I almost dropped the lasagna. This I had not heard before. She went on. He was so shy in bed. He just touched me and he was finished. I stood in silence, blinking. She pointed to the fridge. Oh, you can put that right there on the top shelf. She walked toward me, leaning on her cane, wincing each time she took a slow, small step. I opened the refrigerator door and my heart broke. There was a half a bottle of ketchup turned upside down, a bottle of milk, a small loaf of bread, and some plastic baggies, each with a few slices of turkey, salami, and cheese. I had never seen it so sparse before. Pierce is going shopping for me on Wednesday, so you came just in time. I can probably make 2 or 3 meals out of what you've brought. How's your little man doing? How old is he now? Olga said, holding onto my arm tightly. I was surprised at her question. He's 8. 8, she smiled. My goodness, I remember when he was so small. You do? Yes. He was out with your husband in the snow outside a few years ago. I was watching from the window. Why hadn't she ever told me this? She went on. Your husband took off his tiny glove and put a little bit of snow in his hand. He wanted him to know what snow felt like. And I just stood in the window watching, and I had tears in my eyes. Olga, you don't have to feel badly for him. And when you used to push him on the swing in the yard, I would open my window so I could hear your voices. You would sing to him, and he would sing back to you, and I'd hear him laugh. What a sweetheart he is. He must be too big for that swing now. That was his toddler swing, Olga. How are his eyes? She squeezed my arm again. I've seen you practicing outside with him, tapping his little cane back and forth. Is there any hope? Not really, not now anyway. I felt a lump in my throat, but I wouldn't give in to it. We have a very good doctor, but none of the surgeries worked. You know, I pray for little Oscar every night, she said. You do? I pray for my 2 sons first. I tell God to watch over the one in California who never calls me, and then Edward that he'll find a donor, and then little Oscar is third. I tell God, please bless him and his parents. Give them patience. He's going to be okay, but his parents are going to need patience. Well, your prayers must be working, Olga. Samuel and I are very patient with him. And I know what it's like not to see. It's hard, but at least I could see it one time. My eyes started to well up. As much as I thought I had my son's blindness in perspective, as determined as I was that he'd be independent and successful, as much as I convinced myself that I wasn't hoping that his blindness would be cured one day, a prayer from the heart of this old woman across our driveway with nothing in her refrigerator grabbed at my throat and my heart and didn't let go. She leaned in close to me and I could smell the scent of her soap and a little bit of perfume on her clothes. I know he's going to see one day, she spoke softly. It's not going to be perfect, but I can tell you it's going to happen. I won't be there to see it myself, but I'll be a little angel on his shoulder when it happens. She tapped my shoulder gently. A tear raced down my face. I pray for those doctors too. I say, let those doctors find a cure fast so he could see his beautiful parents. Thank you, Olga. Come here, I have something for you, she said. She led me into the dining room. There was a large box of jewelry on the table. I'm going through all my things that I'm leaving to my family. Most of them have already requested certain items. My opera coat, my good fur, my mother's china. They all know what they want. You believe that? I wiped my nose with a tissue from my pocket. Here, she said, holding up a gold necklace. You take this. Olga, you don't have to give me anything. My father bought this for me when I was a young girl. Thank you. I kissed her on the cheek and gave her a hug. My eye caught the time on my watch. Oh my gosh, I have to put Oscar to bed. I have to run, Olga. Okay, go ahead then. Thank you. The necklace is beautiful. Bring Oscar around to see me sometime. I'll bring him some cookies. Okay, Olga, I called from the front door. When I returned home, Oscar was already asleep. I showed my husband the necklace. 3 green gems were arranged in a simple setting on a gold chain. Look to see if it's good gold, Samuel said. It doesn't matter, I told him. Just check, you never know. I brought the necklace under a lamp and carefully examined the setting, looking for an indication of the type of gold. There is something on it, I said, tilting the back of the setting in the light. A cluster of small raised letters glistened on the gold. I blinked as I brought the necklace closer and then saw the marking on it. Avon. What does it say? Samuel said. It says 14 karat gold, I told him. That could be worth something. I smiled at him. It was.